Perfect.
Yeah, well, Bapu Trust, when we began, we started with this idea that mental health care needs to be a caring environment for people. So we needed to create caring environments. And of course, as you know, mental health practice in post-colonial India depended and depends on mental institutions where there is no care. A lot of law applies. So we were looking for ideas on creating caring communities. So we selected one urban poor community, a slum in Pune city, and started testing out ideas, of can people support each other, and can people come together, form groups and support each other. That's the difference between the mental health system and the kind of system that Bapu Trust wants to create. It wants to create an environment where 2 people, 4 people, 5 people, family members, community members, neighbors can just sit around and say, okay, you say that you're cursed by the Nagas. What does that mean for you, so that's it. I think that's what we wanted to start doing. And by now, it's been 18 years of doing this, and we've added many elements along the way. Sometimes in our communities, people go like crazy because they are deficient in vitamins, especially malnutrition, anemia, vitamin D, vitamin B. So we have sometimes we realize that this is not a mental issue or a spiritual issue, but it's actually a malnutrition issue. And so we might refer them for checking up of their vitamins. Sometimes we, especially wandering people, they are highly stigmatized in communities. And usually the system will come pick up these people and put them inside an institution. So what we do is we set up support systems along the way, and we try to understand what is the beat of this person. Where does this person go? When does he leave? Usually it's a he. A woman who is highly disturbed would shut herself in and remain at home, but a man would go away and he would wander. And sometimes he would shed his clothes, and so we mobilize the neighborhood and we explain that this person has a disability. So can we support them? So somebody might offer them biscuits, somebody might offer them chai, somebody might offer them food, somebody might just be around, so whatever, in whatever way a support system is. So we create support systems for people in the urban community. Sometimes it's a neighbor. When families are very rejecting, a neighbor may step in and say that, hey, I'm there to support you, knock on the door and say, do you want some food? Do you want me to take care of your child? Is there something that I can do for you? So we set up support systems. This is our main job. I'm also an arts-based therapist. I learned arts-based therapy, and I've been a practitioner of arts-based therapy and a teacher of arts-based therapy for a long time now. I also have very strong belief in the role of nutrition and fitness schedules in keeping mentally fit. And so all these things we bring into so the people who deliver the service are people who live in that community, who we train. So we have like really a huge number of people who are living in the community and also serving the same communities. We really believe in choice, we believe in choice. Some people may say, I embrace my religiosity, and that's fine. Some people may say that I want psychiatric treatment, and then that's fine too. Don't put pressure that for this problem only psychiatry can help. You must read about, we are very inspired by the Hearing Voices movement. It's all over Europe and it's all over the US. Hearing Voices movement says that for about 30% of people, psychiatric drugs actually help. But for a bulk of people, these drugs actually cause harm. And so they have a way of dealing with the voices, and there are many, like Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step method for the Hearing Voices movement. There are many steps to that. And for us, we find that, voice hearing is difficult for the human body to sustain voice hearing 24/7 and for 365 days in a year. So you do find moments when you can exchange with a person. And then those are the points at which you make social connection. And when people know that you care, they do start to come back. Like, I can tell you another story of a man who, who served in the government mortuary, handling dead bodies for 26 years. And the government mortuary is really a very morbid place, because they get people who died on accidents, people who were homeless and died on the streets. They get all kinds of dead bodies into this place. And he was, of course, completely drunk. And after a point, he started to see the dead bodies, speaking to him. And then he quit his job and he got a disability pension. The first time we met him, he had talismans, the chains, lots of amulets, many crosses, Jesus Christ, So he was like, his whole body was covered with charms. And we did work with him. He was not communicating, no eye contact, no clothes to wear, just these amulets and these rings and, these things. And so we worked with him a long time using arts-based therapy. And he came out of it and he did very well. Yeah. He had tried all kinds of psychiatric drugs. It didn't help him. So we say that psychiatric medication is like treating the flu. It's not like treating cancer. In the short term, it helps. In the long term, it causes harm. You can't be on antibiotics your whole life. When you need it, you take it. And after that, you drop it, And so if it helps, it helps. But for many people, it doesn't. Why did psychiatry become the way that it has in India? It's also true that many post-colonial Commonwealth nations, you will find psychiatry in this form. For example, Fiji Islands, Malaysia, Singapore, many of these places, psychiatry is not liberated from colonialism. I think that there is a useful part to psychiatry, and that is about, giving care. Unfortunately, in all these Commonwealth countries, there are laws which are 200 years old, which allows for the colonial design of mental institutions to be replicated again and again. So in India, for example, you have 5 or 7 versions. You had the Indian Lunatic Asylums Act of 1858. Then you had the Lunacy Act of 1912. Then after independence, we have the Mental Health Act of 1987. Now you have the Mental Health Care Act of 2017. Now, all of them replicate the colonial design. And I feel that the impact of colonialism on Indian psychiatry has not allowed it to liberate itself and look at people with a diversity of experiences as, as just those many experiences. It need not be pathologized. Some people, like, for example, I have another story to tell, if that's okay. In our urban poor community, we met a family, which never stepped out of the house. There was husband, wife, and 2 kids. And all of them believed in a very, very strong, committed way that there is a curse on them by the snake gods that they worshipped, and that the snake gods will punish them even more if they step out of the house. They were disabled because of their belief system. And that they could have some psychosocial issues because their belief system it did not let them thrive, it made them move towards malnourishment, stunted growth for the kids, no sunlight, all of that, and no food, no hygiene, personal hygiene. So they were moving in a particular pathway, and we felt that we had to start talking about not psychiatric treatment, but mental health treatment. But of course, when we suggested this, they just moved away from, that location. They went somewhere else where they would not be disturbed, in their belief systems. Sometimes people who provide psychiatric treatments can jump in too fast and too hard. to disrupt the belief system, and people may feel that their personal space is violated, because it's a very strong core belief that even for me, it is a highly academic filter. I write a lot, even now I write a lot. And so this is the filter. Okay, you want to know me, you want to see me, you want to know about what I'm thinking on psychiatry. Okay, you see this filter, and that is rationalized, there is logic to it. And even that people find difficult to accept. This relates to a lot of women in India and in other cultures like India in the Asia Pacific region. I'm thinking of Yeni Rosa from Indonesia, and she told me about shamanism, and shamans can bring down the rain, and if there is no rain for a particular season, then so it's all over. I'm sure it's there in Pakistan. Pakistan is so close to us. There is the jinn phenomenon of being affected by the jinn. It's there in Bangladesh. All over this region, you have animism and being occupied by different entities, and it makes life interesting. Who wants to be oneself for a whole lifetime? And that's mental health. I would love to be some other beings or just exchange with some other social beings. It makes my life bearable. I can deal with adversity, and it's like psychodrama. It's like theater. Yeah, well, in India, not a lot. You must have seen other places, Bengal and other places where mental health work is happening. And after my PhD, I did not find many people like me. That we must respect pluralism, that not everything is a mental illness, not everything needs to be treated. There are social justice issues. So people did not seem to think like this. Even today, there are not many people thinking like this in the mental health system. And so I had to go and find out. So I started to travel. I went to Nepal. Nepal was never colonized by any country. Nepal was my first stop, and I realized that if you were not colonized by the British, then you have a very different culture, and so they didn't have mental institutions, they didn't have mental health laws, they didn't have the stereotype that mentally ill people are dangerous and, they're not safe to be around, so they had a very natural view of, getting sick and moving on, and by this time in India, the WHO, the World Health Organization, had really propagated the view that if you don't have a mental health law, then somehow your country is backward. Whereas I saw Nepal and I found them to be completely decolonized. They don't have these assumptions about mentally ill people. They don't have these colonial asylums. People come into a setup and then they get treated and then they go. The doctors were not like trying to catch you and put you somewhere, or force medicines into your food and all of that. They were not doing that. So it was a very liberating experience for me. And I said, I have to see more countries. I went to Philippines, I went to Hong Kong, totally colonized. Then Singapore, Malaysia, totally colonized by the British. Indonesia, different. Philippines, different. In the Philippines, they were colonized by the Spanish. Indonesians were colonized by the Dutch. They don't have these assumptions. They may have one law somewhere and they may have one institution in some corner of the country. But Indonesia didn't even have those institutions. Now it's all coming in. People are promoting the mental health law because of the World Health Organization. There are a lot of indigenous groups there, tribal people, indigenous tribal people. So I think so that it's true. But also I feel that the Spanish and Dutch were not so good at colonizing as the British were. This is my view. The British were thorough. They were thorough administrators. The Dutch were, how they are, they didn't know how to colonize everything. The British knew, they knew, start with the toilets right up to, the aircraft, they know how to colonize everything. So in today, India is, most of our railways, all the universities, the roads, the canal systems, everything is British, even today, the buildings, the architecture, but the Dutch were, they didn't have that capacity. They didn't have that capacity to fully colonize countries. And so I believe that Indonesia was spared because of that. And Philippines, they were colonized by the Spanish, and Spanish also were not like fanatically colonizing, and so they also left like many cultural elements intact. So this is what I found when I traveled through Asia Pacific region, that in some countries it's possible to start Bapu Trust-like projects in the community. And in some countries it's going to be impossible. The Commonwealth is going to be impossible. And so, yeah, so we have now partners in Nepal and Indonesia, in several countries in Sri Lanka. It actually liberated me to think that, there are parts of the world where it's possible to set up Bapu Trust-like community support systems. Yeah, to find out if there are others like me, thinking like me, having a different view for the mental health system. The United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a UN-based document. It's a legal document. And for me, that's the key instrument for decolonizing mental health. It gives a beautiful view about families and communities, which you will not find in any other UN convention. And so it's a very positive way of looking at what a world should look like, and it was important for me because I was trained in the CRPD. It was important for me to take this message everywhere so that people don't think that if somebody has a stress or tension or mental health issues, then they must be treated medically. There are community ways of integrating such people, and caring for them. Not everybody needs to end up in a mental asylum. Very few people actually need that.